Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update. The first part thereof, the 18th of December 2025. Merry Christmas, one and all. I say that because last night I was at my neighbour's, not Doris. Doris doesn't really exist. My other neighbours that way for mulled wine and mince pies, and what a jolly time it was too. Lots of neighbours together, in existing in happy unison. I wish the same could be said about certain communities along the front line in Ukraine. However, I always think that whenever I say something positive about my own life, I'm like, oh no, remember things are tough elsewhere, most particularly Ukraine. But there's a bit of a smile on my face today because I've just heard that a huge strike has taken place overnight, or a number of strikes with drones on Belbek Airbase. We're going to talk about quite a haul of equipment, including a jet that have been taken out there. So that's one of the main things. We're going to talk about personnel losses again, mention the submarine as well. Not too much in terms of distance strikes overnight, but FP2 still operating pretty effectively in these near rear areas. Okay, before we get on with the details, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Keep yourselves in the loop. Thanks to all those who have already done so. Okay, details. And we start, as ever, with the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. Now, first thing to note here is that the personnel figures have dropped hugely since the day before. 1,700 plus the day before, though. So that was a phenomenally anomalous and very large number of personnel lost. And we were at over 20, I think it was 21 armored combat vehicles. We're down to 0 armored combat vehicles, 950 personnel, which is still a pretty decent number, all things considered. 5 tanks as well added to the list, 27 artillery systems, that's a good number, 2 multiple launch rocket systems and 1 air defense system, that's useful. 119 vehicles and fuel tanks there, that signifies that there's quite a bit of activity still going on the front lines. 119 vehicles and fuel tanks, 950 personnel is an active front line. Okay, I said we're going to be concentrating a little bit on personnel figures because some stats have come out from different places. This is Andrew Perpetua's stats. And by the way, he said, I'll bring in his claims on vehicle stats to just give you a sense of how busy this man is. He says, for your information, there are almost 400 vehicle losses today, and I'm so tired going through them. It's ridiculous. He also said in a statement that the reason he doesn't do his loss lists anymore, which was so freaking useful, is that he is so busy. He says there's only 24 hours in a day. I wish there was 27 or 28, then I could do those loss lists. There isn't, so I can't. Like, as a single person doing all that he does, it's exhausting stuff. And, you know, like myself, I haven't had a day off in over 3 years now. Andrew Perpetua, I swear, must work harder still. And yeah, the amount of hours a day he is looking at videos and doing stuff. But he's got, with the loss list figures, if you remember that, and you had those lists that were color coordinated, and at the very top he'd started putting over, how long has he been doing it now? 478 days now of putting the killed. So on every video that he looks at, you know, he works out whether, oh, that's a BMP2 that's been blown up. Okay, add that to the list. But then he started to see, obviously seeing so many videos with human beings being killed, and it's very macabre, but from a statistical point of view, it's quite useful to look at trend lines, you know, take ourselves out from the human cost of this war, and so on and so forth. Just like understanding the trends in vehicle losses is important, I think, to understand the trends in personnel losses. And although he's only going to get like a fraction, you know, the sense of, he's not going to have an accurate number of how many people are dying each day. At least, you know, the total numbers are going to be far, far greater than what he gets. But if he will, assuming he's going to get over time a relatively consistent fraction of the overall deaths, then you can plot these trend lines that I think are useful. And so he said over the past 6 days of Russian KIA stats, they show an increasing trend. A week ago, the 30-day average was 140.3 killed per day. Now it's 151.5. So for the 30-day average, the last 30 days averaged over 30 days, and then on that particular day to shift the whole 30-day average up by 11, pretty much 11.2 there, just in a week. So you move that a week forward and it shifted the whole of the 30-day average up by 11. I think that's significant. We have counted 59,471 people killed in the past 478 days. That's insane. So he's literally counted 59,471 dead bodies. There's an argument to say he's seen more dead bodies than most other people on Earth. That is 124.4 killed per day. This number is steadily increasing. It was 123.8 6 days ago. In other words, the entire average since he had been 478 days now, or whatever it is, the entire average over the time he's been collecting the figures has shifted up just in the last 6 days. It's shifted the whole daily average up. So wow, it's been a tough time for the Russians, and you can see the figures here are going upwards. You had a few spikes back here. What's that? That's the 1st of December. Some pretty high numbers there, but it'd be interesting to see this over time, this bar chart going backwards again, rather like we look at Dell's stats as you've got here, and we look at, say, the personnel lost. In fact, let's do that. Let's look at the personnel lost over time, as according to the Ukrainian General Staff. And what we're trying to do, therefore, is get a sense of whether these General Staff figures are accurate or not. Okay. And what you see here, my head's not in a way too much, is that it has been spiking up big time recently. We're not back to where we were when there was some days of 2,000 troops getting lost, but considering there's a 1,700 thrown in there, 1,400, a couple of 1,300s, you've got a pretty bad week for the Russians that's just taken place. Now, that will shift the average of the whole war up, because if you look back at the beginning of the war, the numbers were so much lower. And then as the Russians started using meat waves and really it became much more positional, and drones became much more prevalent, and individual drones for individual soldiers, and so many drones, then you're starting to see like huge numbers being lost over this period. But then it started ticking downwards, and now we've seen an uptick, which is shifting it's shifting the 30-day average, which is kind of this amount here, and then it's shifting the whole war average, because of if this is higher, I guess the average is going to be something like here. Given you've got very low down here and very high up there, so the average is probably here, and it's above the average, so it's pushing it up. So just in case you didn't know how numbers worked. Okay. Chris Owicki adds 790 Russian soldiers from a single unit have died in Pokrovsk, according to a Russian combat medic, with another 900 having deserted, according to leaked figures. Another soldier from the same unit says that losses are running at 80 to 90%. That's obscene, right? The unnamed medic says she is serving with the 39th Separate Guards Motorized Rifle Brigade, military unit 35390 at Pokrovsk. She describes how she was on the front line with young guys aged 19 to 20. They were running around, and we had dugouts, I think. And I say, no, F that. They ran in shorts into a Ukrainian minefield, and it just tore them apart. Well, it's not like they were 200 dead. None of them died. Well, they were just blown up really badly. We had to run the medics to pull them out. One had his heel torn off, another was effed up, another came in with his shoulder through his arm. They sent us 2 young effing snipers. They only spent an effing day with us in the dugout. Then bam, we went to the front line. Evacuation is a complete failure. We're effing running. I say, where are the effing snipers? There are no effing snipers. They've effing run away. There's always that kind of S going on here. They effing get effed up and run who knows where. Then you have to drag them out, effing take them away. Look, I have these lists. I have 48 pages. There are the dead. These are ours. In total, if you count, 790 people. We had a commander at the time. He let them do whatever they wanted. He was straight with them. He was drunk. He was completely effed up. He just sat there, F it, completely. I told him, give us a break, give us the city. We need to wash up, shave. We have, for example, one commander The one we have now is a dumbass. He's as dumb as a brick. I don't know how much education he has. I think I'm dealing with an effing teenager. The brigade, which is that's the end of the quote. The brigade, which is commanded by Colonel Denis Nikolaevich Polulyak, had over 900 men listed as AWOL as of 2nd December 2025, according to recently leaked documents. This is clearly correlated with the stresses of the intense combat around Pokrovsk. After the brigade was transferred to the Pokrovsk area early in 2025, the number of soldiers who left their unit without authorization tripled from 217 in 2024 to 617 in 2025. And of course, that year isn't even over. In a video recorded in late November, a soldier from Vladivostok with a call sign Fortuna has spoken of the dire situation facing Russians fighting at Pokrovsk. He says, it's tough. And there are so many guys getting killed here. It's effing crazy. No matter which assault we go on, everyone gets killed. Everyone gets killed. Eff it. The losses are effing huge. Look, for example, 100 people go in and, well, maybe 15 to 20 people come out, maybe even 10. The brigade has a long-standing reputation for treating its men brutally. Soldiers have complained of being beaten with rubber truncheons and threatening with execution to force them to go into assaults. One man says, quote, "We're just meat. The most important thing they need is meat, and that's all." So yeah, another anecdote, but it's fitting in with all of these data points. You know, you're looking at the videos coming in from Andrew Perpetua. You're looking at general staff statistics that are coming in that we can look at over time. You're looking at anecdotes from here, from a couple of people associated with different units. You're looking at what Zelensky said yesterday about 30,000 killed a month. And then you've got Commander Magyar. So this is Brovdi from Magyar's Birds, reveals the speed of Ivan moving toward the abyss. The Birds USF exchange point operates 24/7. We convert them into yobliks. The weighted average stands at 1 day equal one enemy battalion at full assault strength. Over the past day, December the 16th, Ivan kept moving toward the abyss without a pause at the speed of 21 worms per hour. At exactly this pace, the Birds of the USF grouping pecked 507. I showed you the 507 stat from the data, so that was not yesterday, the day before. Yobliks over 24 hours. The occupier will not be allowed to idle this winter, without a doubt. To hell with those fogs. Without them, the worm might have been more cautious. By 8, so actually they're saying here that because the fog gives them extra cover, they're starting to come out and attack more. But actually, it appears that the fog isn't giving them as much cover as they would like, and that lack of caution is leading to more Russian deaths. Without them, the worm might have been more cautious, he says. By 8:30 in the morning, the first 100 had already been sung off. So the current day once again promises a steady exchange rate of time for worms. USF, so Unmanned Systems Forces Deep Strike Birds, were productive as well. More on that in a second. A lit up oil poorhouse refinery and several military facilities into temporarily occupied territories were worked over, including the occupied part of the Kherson region. More to come. Okay, and you can go and track them. I'm not going to show you today just for time, the sake of time. But then and I'm going to play, I'm going to not play you, I'm going to read you this. This is his one from this morning, which is there's almost a poetry. It's a really harsh, abrasive poetry to what he says, but I feel it there. I mean, he is obviously very disdainful of anything Russian. So Commander Magyar on the fog at the front and the fog of peace negotiations. For 14 hours straight, we've been working by touch alone. On key directions, a solid wall of fog. The enemy is taking advantage of it. Over the past day, only 378 worms were detoxified. The worm got lucky. Its existence was prolonged, at a minimum, for 100 to 150 future Lyobliks. We'll catch up. Damn it. No one will have to burn with shame. What worries me more is a fog of perspective. Partners are full of optimism about a possible signing of an agreement, while the swamps openly designate the coming year as a year of war. Having been bruised more than once between promise, trinkets of global diplomacy blasted from every iron, and the reality of the bunker Führer's actions, I see such a thickening of this fog ahead that God's own world disappears from view. The Ukrainian army will have to grind on for a long time yet, and our people will have to endure and come to terms. There are not clouds. These are effing storm fronts. But even behind them, somewhere, it will clear. As a friend of mine used to say, somehow it will be. It's never been that it wasn't somehow. That somehow, in this context, is pure unknown, a real dunno. We keep pecking. So interesting view that peace negotiations, just these kind of trinkets that are promised that don't deliver, and they'll be fighting for a long time. But don't worry, he'll be grinding on. On the Le Mans axis, the Ukraine's Third Army Corps and military intelligence wiped out a full Russian regiment during recent assaults. Ukrainian forces also took several prisoners and managed to straighten the front line, improving their tactical position in the area, says Noel reports. I mean, Le Mans is a pretty horrible area for the Ukrainians. The Russians are putting lots of pressure on there. I really should do a mapping update today. It's too long that I leave between them. But yeah, that's one of the areas where the Russians are pressuring the Ukrainians a lot, as elsewhere. Halyapale, but the Ukrainians holding on in Pokrovsk, grinding the Russian units down there, and of course Kupiansk. Now, on to Kupiansk, not even having the good sense to turn off the cameras while telling such tall tales. Today, the Russian dictator, says Stratcom Center, was again told that Russia controls the town of Kupiansk. This is complete fiction. We can only imagine what he's being told about the economy. And this, I mean, we've seen the deep state maps, we've seen all these claims. And yet we heard Gerasimov and Putin mention this previously and then say, hey, we can have a ceasefire and get journalists in there to prove to you that Kupiansk is under our control. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians are clearing out the buildings there. They say at the moment, I saw the Ukrainians say is that the remaining Russian soldiers are holed up in multi-story buildings in the middle of Kupiansk, which can be quite difficult to clear out. There comes a point in the life cycle of every authoritarian regime, says Jay in Kiev, in which truth slams hard into the wall of reality. Today, the camera's rolling. Shoigu doubled down, telling Putin that Russia has taken control of Kupiansk, despite all reality confirming it's 100% lie. Things will move fast from here. That looks like Gerasimov to me. But anyway, you get the point. Now, I was involved in a bit of an argument yesterday, and I'm hopefully this isn't a waste of time me explaining, but this is kind of how things work in the Russian world. You've got History Legends, which is a YouTube channel like mine, but from a very pro-Russian point of view. Says, can someone explain how can deep state claim all this area is liberated north of Kupiansk if there is zero geolocated footage to confirm this? I could not find anything. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. By the way, I've written on that extensively. I've written two books worth, and I'm just editing a third book on the principle of extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And nonetheless, literally from October, says Andrew Perpetua, you noob, you don't follow the war closely enough, and then provides some geolocated imagery from his own map. And then someone else, this pro-Russian person, pops in. Yeah, what month are we in now? Andrew says, are you stupid? Ukrainian attacked north out of Holubivka in October. That means Russia was cleared out already by then. Use common sense. This whole area of Kupiansk was cleared out in October, not yesterday. Jesus Christ. This then pro-Russian says, Ukraine attacked north of Holubivka in October. Attacking does not equal holding ground. That means Russia was cleared out already by then, not necessarily. Otherwise, it should apply to each attacks Russia conducts. Whole area was cleared out in October. And the source is basing that logic on, look, 2 months ago, there was one wreck of an abandoned M113 is very fragile at best. Not David D level of strategic big brain, but it's getting there. Jesus Christ, indeed. Andrew Perpetua then replies, literally, how hard do you have to hit your head to realize if they are attacking there, it means they are holding ground in the area, or where the F are they attacking out of? Goddamn, use logic for once in your life. Then the reply is, jumping to conclusion isn't using logic, mate. Neither is self-validation and wishful thinking. What you are claiming to be is a successful advance could simply be an attempt at a push, which led to nothing. And since you are not providing anything to back your claim up, Andrew, and we're getting somewhere meaningful in a second. Andrew then says, so you think Ukraine drove like 6 kilometers through 100% Russian controlled ground? That was 100% entirely 100% in Russian control, totally uncontested 100% control, with zero Ukrainian presence, 100% Russian controlled for 6 kilometers in order to attack the Russian position. You're a clown. Okay, then we get this big claim that went around over the last 2 days, quite big time. And it's interesting, it came up in this argument. So meanwhile, says this pro-Russian person, here is southern Kupiansk. Mind providing an explanation? So the claim here, and this is a video of someone purporting to be in southern Kupiansk, saying today, 15th of 2025, 15th of December, we, the fighters of Russian Federation, are on the streets of the Russian city of Kupiansk, right? And so this is proof that the Ukrainians hadn't cleared the north of Kupiansk because there was supposedly geolocated footage down in the south, in the sense, which is there, by the way. Don't know, perhaps you're not paying that much attention to the war. So this Russian seems to think that, yeah, I've won this argument. Look, there's a geolocated piece of evidence to suggest the Russians are here. And yet this is an argument about the Ukrainians clearing north of the city. So it just doesn't make any sense. Literally, how many times have you hit your head today? Nobody has ever said the entire city was cleared out of godless vermin. And it is known they operate on those streets. Tell them to go about 2 blocks north, though, and see how safe they feel. That is where they get shot. So then this person says, then you should be able to provide evidence of such, right? Yelling, it's true because it's true, blah, 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 blah. So I get involved and say, are you an actual idiot? You and history legends contest that clearing out of the areas north of Kupiansk and cite as evidence a video from the southern streets of Kupiansk right next to Deep State's accepted Russian control zone. Right. Epic level stupidity. So the idea, so the Russians were claiming that Kupiansk is still under Russian control because, look, we've got a geolocated position of a Russian person walking in the streets here. So therefore, Deep State is incorrect in saying that all of this area north of Kupiansk has been cleared. It's like, what? That's like me saying, oh, it's not raining in Paris, in France at the moment because it's not raining outside my house. Yeah, no, that doesn't make any sense. Anyway, point of doing all this is it gets to this brilliant position where, oh, wow, this could be incredibly embarrassing for you because your geolocation appears to be in a completely different town from Kupiansk. I would genuinely like to hear your response. Of course, I'm never going to get one. So this is the claim is that Russian forces walking through and holding a speech in Tavolzhanka, Kharkiv Oblast, claiming they're in Kupiansk. So Tavolzhanka is way north by the Oskil River, a completely different place, and that's been geolocated. So the Russians claiming the point of showing you going through this whole argument is that when you have Gerasimov and Shoigu and Putin making claims about Kupiansk, we talked about this yesterday. Where did they get that information from? How does it come up the hierarchy of command so that these guys are claiming outright falsehoods on national television, and then but you have the Russians themselves producing outright fake documentation where they claim a geolocation is here in Kupiansk on the video and saying, look, I'm walking, this is the street I'm walking in, here it is on a map. And then OSINT people have to go around and say, actually, that's not where you are. It turns out you're in Tavolzhanka, which is under Russian control, but it's way up north here, nothing to do with Kupiansk. And that's why you're walking around calm as you like. So who is believing this? Well, the pro-Russians are, but then are we getting this situation where that bit of fake, this, I don't want to say fake news, but this false claim is being constructed by Russians? Who are they trying to fool? Are they trying to fool us for a PR reason? But do they end up fooling Putin himself, whereby you have the leader of the country making false claims on national television that Ukraine haven't captured Kupiansk, that Russia have full control over Kupiansk? What a weird situation. So anyway, the Russian rebuttal to the Ukrainian claims that they're clearing out Kupiansk is clearly false. So there you go. Right. Huge losses for material for the Russians. But when we look at Jakub Yanovsky's Oryx list, it's swinging all over the shop at the moment. So if you remember, the last list had one Ukrainian loss and like a whole bunch of Russian losses. And then the time before that, there were loads more Ukrainian losses than Russian losses. And now we're swinging back to that situation where there are loads more Ukrainian losses, 63, and only 14 Russian losses. So just all over the shop. And I think sometimes it comes down to montages of videos where you have a whole bunch of equipment in one video, and then you add that to the list. But actually, that's maybe 3 weeks worth of work from that unit, and they put it in one video. So there are lots of skews to this, which is why you want to do it consistently over time, and then they iron themselves out, and you get a proper sense of what's going on. Anyway, just out of information, here is the list of Ukrainian losses, including some BMPs on there. CV90 destroyed, haven't seen them for a long time. Got some M113s, VCC2, goodness me, right, that's an Italian variant of the M113 that I said they had been delivered, and we've already got one destroyed. So they definitely got through. We've got Striker, Bushmaster, so American 3 Strikers destroyed, a Bushmaster Australian mobility vehicle. We've got German FFG MRAP, Oshkosh, that's an ATV, BAT, Kirpi, lots of Western provided vehicles here. Max Pro, Senator, Novator, Kozak. So these Novators and Kozaks are Ukrainian produced ones, and then you got Humvees, so all sorts of mobility vehicles. But I guess you got 5 tanks there, but not Western provided ones. You got that CV90, that's going to hurt a little bit. And yeah, on Sillars, all sorts unknown infantry mobility vehicles. There's an armored recovery vehicle abandoned there, Berger Panzer, and yeah, not too much else. You got just a lot of kit. So that suggests that the Ukrainians are attacking and moving and using proper combat assets to do so. So remember, when we look at the Russian losses and you think, well, they don't have nearly as many of those bits of kit, the Russians only operate. So if we go from, let's go from not BTR, probably M113 all the way down to probably down here, right? Just the M577 is like an M113 as well. So actually to there. So if we do all of these, right, look at how many different types of vehicle there are and how many there are that have been lost. And that is it's harsh that the Ukrainians have lost that many pieces of kit. But the Russians only have the Tiger and the Patriot vehicle. I can only think of 2 equivalent vehicles that they use for in the same way that the Ukrainians use those vehicles. Otherwise, they're using motorbikes, don't get included on this list. Buggies don't get included. ATVs, depending on what the ATV is, but generally not included on this list. SUVs, trucks, they're just not using that kind of equipment. So it won't be recorded on here. That's the point. T90M, single T90M here for the Russians. So that's their best tank. A couple of other tanks there. And then, yeah, BMP 1s and 2s, MTLBs, and then unmanned ground vehicles. So very minimal losses for the Russians, but it doesn't seem to correlate too much with the losses that we see both from the general staff figures and then from the unmanned systems forces figures as well. Anyway, moving on from that, we're going to go to the biggest bit of news that from overnight, which is this. Really good news. Security services of Ukraine conducted a series of precision strikes on the Belbek military airfield in Crimea, destroying Russian military assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Overnight, long-range drones of the SPU's Alpha Special Operations Center struck key elements of the Russian air defense. So they took out 2 Nebo SVU long-range radar systems, which are $60 to $100 million each. A 92N6 radar, that's part of the S-400 complex. So, of course, if you can't use a radar, you can't shoot the missile. So the best thing to take out the radars, then, the launchers come down the list, actually, because you usually have multiple launchers, but they are, their use is contingent upon radars existing. I don't know with the S-400 whether they have a command control center as well, and whether they can't use the launchers without that. And so you want to take these more key aspects out, and that's what they are so often doing, taking out the radars rather than the launchers. The Pantsir S2 air defense system was also taken out, and that's a relatively new piece of kit, 12 to 19 million just for that. And then a MiG-31 aircraft with full combat load, 30 to 50 million worth. And in fact, we have an image of that in a second. So yeah, this is a really good success for the Ukrainians here, taking out MiG-31, 3 different radars, and a Pantsir S2 air defense system. Excellent news for the Ukrainians. And this is the image that we see, the Russian MiG-31 in the sights of the guided long-range strike drone, whether it's an FP2 or what, I don't know, but that is the plane that was taken out. It says it's loaded. I don't know that I can see on there. I don't know, maybe it is. Claim was it had full loadout. And then there's another video of FP2 successes coming as well. These are FP2 drones striking a Russian ammo depot. I think it's a field artillery ammo depot in occupied Borovitsy in Luhansk Oblast, just near the Russian border and 150 kilometers behind the front. Site belonged to the 101st Brigade of the Russian 51st Army and supplied its offensive operations. So let's just have a wee look at what's going on here with these FP2 drones. They are, you can see it's already on fire. So this is a second hit. And it looks like there's, I mean, the issue with these areas is that, you know, if they're sensibly built, which that looks like it is, each of these kind of revetments, or what they called each of these are built in such a way that they should, if they works correctly, protect the other ones. So one strike on this will just take out that small area of the depot, just as you see the burning taking place over here. So really, although you've got burning to the whole, it looks like there's two elements to the burning already going on there. So this has already taken 2 strikes. And then if you look to the right, there's lots more. So really, this is the sort of place that needs either cluster munitions, but I don't know whether the cluster munitions would go through the, I don't know how reinforced these are, but you would essentially need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, you'd need 20 of these FP2 drones to really take out everything there. So this is why you build them in such a way that they only lose, you know, it takes a single munition to take out each component of this storage facility, rather than cooking off and flying into something else. That's why they're built down, they're dug down, and so on and so forth. But anyway, really good news that the Ukrainians are hitting these facilities and that they are using their FP2 drones, I think, more and more, which is suggesting that they are producing them to some at least half decent scale at the moment. Okay. Soldiers from SPU's military counterintelligence department have hit another 137 units of heavy weapons of the occupiers in just the past few months. So this is the SPU's military counterintelligence department taking out 15 air defense systems in this video that you can see: 30 howitzers, 61 guns, 2 self-propelled guns, and a BN-21 Grad. I don't know if it's all in this video, but their claims: 4 tanks and 14 armored personnel carriers, 2 radar systems, 6 radar stations, 5 electronic warfare systems, and 230 drones, 93 vehicles, 18 ammunition depots, and 8 fuel and lubricant depots. So here's a soupçon of what they have done, but these guys obviously operating pretty effectively. And of course, this is just one set of drone operators among absolutely tons along the entirety of the front line. So here we have that same bit of footage. So that, yeah, I included that because it just gave us the detail of it being a field artillery. So it's likely to be mainly holding artillery shells. Then we have MiG-29, Ukrainian MiG-29s hitting Russian positions in the village of Uborki with guided glide bombs. This is really good news. The reason I've included this is because it's north of the border in Bryansk region, which I think is significant when you are still seeing the Ukrainians hit Russian positions north of the border. It shows that they're not safe there, but also that, you know, the Russians might think it is, they're less likely to be struck if they're holding depots and positions north of the border. Well, actually, the Ukrainians might have something to say about that. Now, going on to the submarine, again, we're going to just talk very quickly about that was struck the other day. Subsea Baby didn't sink the Russian submarine, says Euromodern Press, but that doesn't matter. Russia can't fix it anyway. The sub is damaged and struck in Novorossiysk. Turkey closed the Bosphorus Strait, so there's no exit through there. Sevastopol's shipyard is under constant attack. Novorossiysk has docks, but no submarine repair facilities. Russia can't sail it out. They can't fix it there. Half of Russia's caliber submarine fleet is now out of action. So that is a very positive view to say that it has been damaged and they ain't going to be fixing it in Novorossiysk. They can't fix it in Sevastopol. Therefore, it might as well have been sunk because bad boy ain't being used. Now, JMT Politico, who I'm not sure exactly what he's been doing over time, but he has been over there. I don't know if he still is. I know he's been incommunicado for some months now and is back posting on the threads. He says, take it for, you know, pinch of salt and everything, but he appears to be in the know. Says the propeller was totally taken off the submarine, leaving a hole in the ass end, and there were killed in action but cannot release the numbers, but the submarine is out of action till fixed. all for good. But it will be no longer launching missiles on civilians. This is info coming straight from reports that I've seen, but it is all about it, but it is about all I can provide for you guys. But she's done either way. And the best thing about all of this is Putin has had 5 to 6 new fronts opened on him within a week. And this is interesting. This is a good observation here. So shadow fleet hunting, in other words, these shadow fleet oil tankers that have been hit, oil platforms, including, well, in the Caspian Sea, but actually some platforms as well in the Black Sea. UUV says underwater, unmanned underwater vehicles. Ballistics, so ballistic missiles coming online. Power plants, they are being hit. Russian air defense hunting, and Black Sea is now closed to Putin unless he wants everything at the bottom of the sea. But it is over for Russia and Putin now, because we do not just have one ballistic manufacturing or one cruise missile manufacturing or R&D. There are multiple. Russia will not be Russia by 2027, and I do not think Putin will be alive still by 2027. Magyar will take Putin out, that I can promise you. It's a very bullish statement there, but there's certainly a lot of truth in all those different areas opening up now. You've suddenly got underwater capabilities, you've got ballistic and cruise missile manufacturing that is being scaled up, you've got these medium distance drones that are being used so effectively, you've got oil platforms and a shadow fleet now taking hits, as well as obviously the power plants, which wasn't, remember, it wasn't power plants that were being hit, it was oil and gas infrastructure, but now you're seeing actual power plants and substations being hit. Now, as a response to what that underwater drone was able to do, Russians have sunk several barges at the entrance of their naval port pier in Novorossiysk so that no other Ukrainian drones can enter it. This also confines the remnants of the Russian Black Sea Fleet to this little basin. Russians literally barricaded themselves in. Embarrassing, says Tendar. Someone else gives a slightly different understanding. The barges used to reinforce the net or boom defenses in Novorossiysk aren't new and not sunken either. This is a long time practice. It might be new in that little area, though. An example from September the 4th last year is here. The barges are highly likely moved by tugs and moored inside the base when not in position. What happens if the barges are sunk in the entrance? Likely not much. This chart is from CMAP Explorer, not up to date on pier construction, but the depths are likely correct, 23 meters in the entrance itself. So yeah, they tend to leave the center of the entrance open quite often at the times of the sap passes, leaving the 2 barges on either side in place. So it's not completely shutting it off, but it is certainly, they are worried about further attacks, and they've put things in place. Right, distance strikes, 82 drones sent last night, 63 taken out. So again, relatively low figures, 19 drones hitting 12 locations, debris falling on 8 more locations. It's worth reminding ourselves again that the data is very different from the general staff than it is from the Air Force or the air defense units, who they give us numbers at the moment that look something like quite low. And what I wanted to do was see if that was reflected in the general numbers here, because sorry, I'm going all over the shop. It's very clear that the general staff with these brown figures, 330 drones last night or over the last 24 hours is very different from 82 from last night's figures. And the night before was something like, I think it was 89 or maybe 69. And you add those two together, which is wrong anyway, because essentially they cut off from halfway through the night before to halfway through last night. It's going to be half of these figures and half of the figures from the night before. So it's going to be something like, I don't know, I'm guessing, but something, let's say 120 drones that were sent in over the last 24 hours, overnight. But then you look at the general staff figures and they got 330. So it's very clear that they are adding other drones on there. And actually, what I really want to have is access to the blue infographics, just so I can get a sense of what's happening overnight, because these figures have some exceptionally high numbers fairly consistently, and even on low days, the last couple of days have been very low at night, and you've still got 330 over a 24-hour period. 167, okay, that's relatively low. 442, 653, 440, 283, 253. Point being is that they are recording all sorts of drones, probably Molniya drones, and I assume fixed-wing drones, but all the reconnaissance drones, the Lancets, everything gets piled into this number, whereas the blue sheet includes really mainly Shahed drones. They do have this fixed wing image as well. I think that's going to be other drones that are broadly sent overnight. So yeah, those two figures are very different. All right, DTEC, it's a private concern that owns a lot of the energy infrastructure in Ukraine, has revealed footage of a substation in Artsiz in the Odessa region, nearly destroyed by a Russian strike. The attack left large parts of the city without electricity, the power unlikely to be restored before Boxing Day, there before December the 26th. So this is in the Odessa region. It was hit, I presume, 2 nights ago or before. It's not from last night, but that is, like I keep telling you, is a huge problem for the Ukrainians. The energy infrastructure is getting absolutely shellacked all the time. Now, on the other hand, Ukraine has had some success. We've obviously seen what's happened in Crimea, and that's really good. This is Bataisk that has been hit. Several explosions were reported in the Rostov region at Bataisk with a drone alert in effect. One of the downed drones may have struck a residential house, and indeed, that could be what you're seeing in this picture. But there was more, I think, going on in Bataisk. There were, several explosions and lots of people talking about Bataisk. Also, Saratov, the Ordzhonikidze plant is on fire. Large industrial enterprise specializing in the production of instruments and equipment, including for the aviation and defense industries. So that's good. And then we get a bit of a synopsis here from Yuri Slyuzar, so I presume this is a Russian, saying, according to updated information, 2 buildings of the new multi-story building in Rostov were damaged. Damage and smoke were reported on the 5th floor level. Information on casualties is being clarified. A ship was damaged in the port of Rostov. Okay, so we're going to look at that in a second. With preliminary reports of casualties among the crew, the information is being clarified. In Bataisk, 4 residents required medical attention. So that could have been, it could just be a residential building that was hit by an electronic warfare distorted drone or something like that, or more could have happened in Bataisk. I'm not sure. But as far as this oil tanker is concerned, it's a Valery Gorchakov. It was struck in Rostov on Don, killing 2 crew members. It was built in 1969, converted in 2004 under Project 156ST. It's linked to Russia's shadow fleet supplying occupied ports. So that has been hit, and it looks like what you see above there. I think it was converted into a dry cargo ship. So anyway, that has been hit with the death of 2 crew members. That's a shadow fleet vessel. Okay, on to other bits and pieces, and a bit of controversy coming from Estonia as 3 Russian border guards crossed into Estonian territory and hung around for 20 minutes. Estonian and Russian officials are meeting to discuss the issue on Thursday. Estonia said it would also summon Russia's top diplomatic envoy in Tallinn. So this again pushing the envelope, pushing, prodding, probing, trying to get away with as much as they possibly can, the Russians. Now on to the economy, the volume of repo agreements, so repurchase agreements, that's what it stands for, issued by the Central Bank of the Russian Federation to commercial banks reached 3.43 trillion rubles. This is a direct emission. The central bank prints money to finance the budget deficit. So that massive spike there on the right indicates that, well, I think the Russians are in a spot of bother, possibly printing. So repo agreement. Repurchase agreement is a short-term financial transaction where one party sells securities to another and simultaneously agrees to buy them back at a specified future date for a predetermined higher price. It functions as a secured loan with the securities serving as collateral, so sort of bonds type thing. Yeah. So I presume the government just needs a lot of money, and that's what that is showing. A fleet of tankers laden with Russia's flagship Urals oil has expanded. Oh, the fleet has expanded off China's east coast after India, the biggest buyer of that grade, curbed purchases following Western sanctions, according to Bloomberg. At least 5 vessels carrying around 3.4 million barrels. So that's 3.4 million barrels not being sold, and 3.4 million barrels of capacity not able to be used. It's just sitting there. So that you can't, A, you're not selling that, but B, you're not then sending that back to get more stuff to sell that and continually having it move. It is sitting there, and it is blocking the flow and it is not making money. In fact, it's costing money. So double the volume of last week and the highest level of that grade in that region in more than 5 years, according to Kepler. The areas close to the Shandong province are hub for oil refiners. Okay, on to peace talks. Apparently, US and Russian officials will be meeting in Miami this weekend to discuss ending the Ukraine war. So they're going to be taking back the European and Ukrainian peace proposals, giving them to the Russians, and probably trying to agree with the Russians what should happen. With Trump envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner leading talks, the meeting follows quiet negotiations in Berlin on pressuring Kiev into concessions and proposing Western security guarantees for Ukraine, says No Reports. Jason J. Smart says Russia claims the US promised it Ukrainian territory, and this is going off a Telegraph article. US has promised us Ukrainian territory. So Russia claims the US promised it Ukrainian territory. It isn't America's land to give away. Europe didn't ask DC to lead the talks. Ukraine did not ask DC to trade borders. Why is pressure never on Russia to leave? Stop enabling Moscow, Washington. Here we have, an American not very happy with how the US is treating Ukraine there, and indeed promising to Sergei Lavrov and Russia that they will get Ukrainian territory. On behalf of Ukraine, the US is kind of working with Russia there. So now Zelensky's then come out and said, I don't think Putin's economy is capable of continuing the war in the volumes that were before if the sanctions are in effect. So that's what Zelensky said, quote, Putin does not want to end the war. The question of whether he can continue it depends on our partners, in particular on sanctions and diplomatic pressure. So he's like, please, partners, EU, US, please keep up diplomatic pressure, but particularly sanctions. Please keep up sanctions. In other news, the Trump administration has temporarily lifted sanctions on several major Russian banks involved in civil nuclear energy projects, including, according to a 1217 notice from the US Treasury. A new general license allows transactions to continue through the 18th of June 2026, limited to nuclear-related projects that began before the 21st of November 2024. There you go. So, yeah, keep those sanctions up. Now, it's interesting that seems to be the Trump administration and Treasury, and they are in, I think, tension with Congress. Here's a letter from decent US senators about frozen Russian assets. So who do we have here? We've got Michael Bennett, we've got John Kennedy, Adam Schiff, Sheldon Whitehouse. I've got a lot of time for Sheldon Whitehouse. Richard Durbin, Amy Klobuchar, and Peter Welch. I don't know how many of those are Republicans. Is John Kennedy a Republican? Is that anyway? Yeah. So there you go. The senators wanting there to be pressure on Russia using frozen Russian assets. So you've had the White House try to pressure Belgium and other nations not to disperse those frozen Russian assets to Ukraine, and then you have US senators saying, please use those frozen Russian assets. So a letter saying we definitely agree with that. Now, Berlin leaders' statement has been made. This was made on December the 15th. Anton Gerashenko says, my thoughts on its strengths and weaknesses. What is this document? So there was a statement of the joint political group of European leaders and EU leadership against the backdrop of active negotiations to end the war. He takes us through it. So its main difference from previous vague guarantees is that it's not limited to the words, quote, we support Ukraine, but attempts to describe how security guarantees should work. A strong Ukrainian army, European participation, the role of the US in monitoring the ceasefire. This is definitely a step forward, but it will only be effective when clear details emerge, including who does what, for how much money, and according to what rules. What exactly is being proposed, though, briefly, the statement says that the issues of territories should not be resolved, quote, in exchange for a pause. Robust security guarantees must come first. Then the following commitments are described: support for Ukraine's defense with a target of approximately 800,000 armed forces in peacetime, creation of the European multinational force with the coalition of the willing, with the US support to help Ukraine restore its military capabilities and secure our skies and seas, a US-led mechanism for monitoring and verifying a ceasefire, and a formula for a legally binding response to a renewed attack, but with the provided proviso that each country acts according to its own internal rules. The strongest aspect here is that the guarantees are presented as a package that should work together rather than as a set of well-meaning words. The first pillar is Ukraine itself, a large, well-trained army as a first shield that makes another attack less advantageous. The second is European participation, an additional level of support after the ceasefire. The third is the US as an anchor monitoring compliance with the ceasefire, increases the chance of quickly identifying violations and responding to them. This three-layer program is an attempt to move closer to the logic of strong guarantees without formal NATO membership. The second strength is the order of the actions: security first, then discussions about territories. This is important as a signal that territory should not become a down payment for a truce. Third, the statement attempts to link security to a broader Ukrainian-European track: recovery, discussions of frozen Russian assets, and the prospect of EU membership. The weaknesses: the main problem is the lack of specifics about the European multinational force. There are general functions, but almost no answers to key questions: how many people, where exactly they'll be, who will command them, what rules for the use of force will apply, and what to do in the case of provocations or escalation. By the way, as an aside, though, I think Keir Starmer was indicating that that detail has been worked out separately with the coalition of the willing. So without clear rules, this could become a symbolic presence that does not deter. The second weakness is a formula legally binding, subject to national procedures. In practice, this means that decisions can be made differently and at different speeds in different countries, and the enemy can count on the Allies' response being slow or uneven. The third risk is dependence on the US. The role of the US in verifying and supporting the coalition forces increases reliability, but makes the whole program vulnerable to changes in Washington's policy and the US's willingness to adhere to this for a long time. The fourth point concerns resources and capabilities. Even if a political decision is made, such a force requires long-term funding and expensive capabilities: air defense, aviation, logistics, command and control, intelligence. I mean, yeah, that's why NATO Article 5 would have been the best option, because it's the cheapest. So conclusion, it's a step forward, but not a ready-made solution. This is a step forward in creating the conditions for a lasting peace, because for the first time, guarantees are described as a system rather than general words, but it's not a ready-made plan yet. Because it lacks details, clear rules, clear contributions from countries, the role of the US in numbers and commitments, and understandable legal procedures. This plan can also be called a step forward for European security, because the document records a shift toward European leadership in strong security. Europe is taking on the role of organizer of the coalition and multinational force, while the US is defined as a key anchor in monitoring and support. This is a change in logic from Ask Washington to Europe Acts, Washington Reinforces. The statement was adopted by the following leaders, and it gives a list of all of those European leaders that have done the work of agreeing to that. And just finally, EU's to phase out imports of Russian gas. It's a further release there. MPs they've approved the gradual ban on pipeline and liquefied natural gas imports as of 2026. The Commission to prepare a ban on oil imports in 2027, and harmonise maximum penalties in case of infringements. So that's really good. And indeed, when you look at the price of gas, that's normalized again. So the whole idea that, oh, we can't do without Russian gas appears not to be a thing. So there you go. Some good news, some interesting moves there, and good to see the Ukrainians have hammered Belbek Airbase. Please remember to go to atpgeo.com/donate to see if you can contribute to our fundraiser together with Jonathan Fink from Silicon Curtain. We are now so close, $14,400 into this amazing campaign. So thank you. And also remember atpgeo.com/UK petition to sign up to get UK forces helping out in the west of Ukraine, if at all possible. Okay, take care, and I will speak to you soon. Toodle pits.